You might believe in destiny. But if you ask me, and I'm glad you did, there is one powerful force that drives human behavior and changes the world. Money. This is room 214 in the Watergate Hotel in Washington, D.C. It was in this very room that back in 1972, White House aides G. Gordon Liddy and E. Howard Hunt oversaw the break-in to Democratic headquarters that led to the Watergate scandal. One of the most famous phrases from that scandal is, of course, "follow the money," which Deep Throat said to Bob Woodward in that parking garage. But he never really said it, and Woodward and Bernstein never really wrote it. The line comes from the movie All the President's Men. But we remember that line because it captures an essential truth. If you really want to know what happened at Watergate, as well as a lot of other things in our history, you gotta follow the money.
But in all of my years of public life, I have never profited from public service. I've earned every cent.
Even as he was consumed by the Watergate scandal, President Nixon took the time to lie about his income tax evasion.
That in my years of public life, that I welcome this kind of examination because people have got to know whether or not their president's a crook. Well, I'm not a crook.
One of the things that Nixon always insisted is that he was never in it for the money.
Right.
As if that's makes it okay.
Right.
But he kind of was.
He clearly was, yeah. You know,
right.
He always wanted to be seated at the cool kids table, and he never got there. And so he wanted money, he wanted the things that money, could buy, like beautiful houses and such. So he really did like money and really wanted money, personal money, not just money for his campaigns.
Nixon leapt to national fame in 1952 when Dwight Eisenhower chose him as his vice presidential running mate. But just 2 months later, Nixon endured his first major scandal. His political backers had established a fund to cover expenses, or, as the New York Post put it, secret rich men's trust fund keeps Nixon in style far beyond his salary. And that's why we need tabloids. On September 23, 1952, NBC broadcast a brand new soap opera. There was just one episode.
The following program is sponsored by the Republican National Committee.
Not 1 cent of the $18,000 or any other money of that type ever went to me for my personal use.
60 million Americans, the largest TV audience to that time, heard or saw that speech. And what they saw, the nation decided, was an honest man. It worked. Nixon was now down the hall from ultimate power, but he had a little problem. Specifically, a little brother. I didn't realize that Nixon, like Jimmy Carter, like certain other,
like Teddy Roosevelt, like Billy.
they all had like crazy brothers.
Yeah.
And his brother Don Nixon ran a hamburger stand.
Yes, a aspiring chain of drive-through burger joints, and was not very good at it, and it wasn't doing particularly well. And lo and behold, he gets a big loan from a guy named Howard Hughes.
Yep, that Howard Hughes. Famed film producer, lover of leading ladies, aerospace and casino mogul, and charter member of the Billionaire Recluse Hall of Fame.
Howard Hughes testifies regarding his $40 million plane contract before a Senate War Investigating Committee.
Well, I'll ask you again. Will you bring Mr. Mars in at the 2 o'clock session?
No, I don't think I will.
Will you try to bring him in?
No, I don't think I'll try.
In 1957, Hughes loaned $205,000 to Donald Nixon to prop up his chain of fast food joints named, imaginatively, Nixon's. Perhaps Hughes just really loved the Nixonburger, and since it was only 20 cents with cheese, he could afford about 1 billion of them. By sheer coincidence, the thoughtful leg up to Donald Nixon was followed by the feds granting lucrative new routes to Hughes-owned Transworld Airlines. Nixon continued his relentless climb to the top, until the story broke days before the 1960 election. Nixon insisted the loan had nothing to do with him. It was for Donald and guaranteed by their mother, Hannah Nixon.
I want all of you to know.
Was it that famous televised debate that cost Nixon the election? Just as likely, it was the Nixonburger scandal.
I want Senator Kennedy to know, and I want all of you to know, that certainly if this trend does continue and he does become our next president, that he will have my wholehearted support and yours too.
Fast forward to 1968. Nixon and Hughes are back in the swamp. They crave power and influence. Hughes brags that there is no man on earth he can't buy or destroy. For Nixon, that's an easy choice.
In 1968, his industries are facing tough, scrutiny from Washington and regulations, and he wants some relief. And he decides that Nixon, a Republican, has to be elected. So he ends up giving $100,000, not directly to Nixon, but to one of Nixon's friends, a guy named B.B. Rebozo, which is,
God bless B.B. Rebozo.
In the Hall of Fame of American names, up there with, Kiki Vandeweghe and Zsa Zsa Gabor, and is B.B. Rebozo. And he's this buddy of Nixon, a fixer kind of a guy, and he takes the money, and it is believed that a lot of that money went right into Nixon's pocket, not just into the election.
The cash in $100 bills passed from B.B. the bagman to Nixon's pocket. And from there to improvements in Nixon's estate in Key Biscayne, Florida, some remodeling, a new swimming pool, and Arnold Palmer putting green. Very nice. Oh, hi. You've caught me indulging my inner Woodward and Bernstein. So the current owners of the Watergate Hotel have created this scandal room to commemorate the history and also to make a little money. You can rent it out. That's appropriate because it was Richard Nixon's obsessions with history and money that led to his downfall. He installed the White House taping system so that he could control how history would remember him. And it worked, sort of. And that money from Howard Hughes, he was an intelligent man. He must have known he should not take it. But there it was. A Senate investigation later concluded that the $100,000 was just one of several payoffs Hughes made to Nixon. On the White House tapes, those bribes are politely referred to as Florida dealings.
Having lost a close one 8 years ago and having won a close one this year, I can say this: winning's a lot more fun. Preserve, protect, and defend
the Constitution of the United States.
Nixon lived in dread that Hughes would expose their secret.
So help me God.
Nixon's paranoia hit the boiling point when Kennedy confidant Lawrence O'Brien took on two jobs: Washington lobbyist for Howard Hughes and chairman of the Democratic National Committee. The White House went on high alert. Did O'Brien know about the Hughes payments to Nixon? Would he reveal them before the 1972 election? Nixon had to know.
Get it done. I want it done.
O'Brien's taxes were audited, his home burgled. Then, on June 17, 1972, 5 men were caught breaking into his office at the Watergate complex. In his audio diary, Nixon Chief of Staff H.R. Haldeman connects the dots from the Hughes bribe to the Watergate break-in.
Jebb's view is the following, that the plan was hatched at the White House by Hunt, Liddy, and Colson. Colson called Jebb twice to tell him to get going on this thing, specifically the Larry O'Brien information regarding the Florida dealings.
Then, of course, after the initial break-in that was caught in Watergate, they had to pony up what they thought might be as much as $1 million to pay to silence the 5 guys that broke into the Watergate hotel.
In fact, that was one of the famous Watergate tapes,
Yeah.
where Nixon says, what would it take?
Yeah, he asked John Dean.
Right. What would it take to keep these guys quiet? And Dean says it would take about $1 million. And Nixon says, we could do that.
Yeah.
And then the story they came out with was the tape didn't pick him up saying, but that would be wrong.
Yeah.
Which is truly one of the great dumb excuses
Right.
in all of American history.
I would say these people are going to cost $1 million over the next few years. You on the money, if you need the money. I mean, you can get the money. Well, I think that's where what I mean is you can get $1 million and you can get it in cash. I know where it can be gotten.
Nixon's team paid $400,000 in blackmail to the Watergate defendants, $2.5 million in today's money. Like their boss, his henchmen saw themselves as tough guys, and like him, they had seen too many heist movies. Cash was dropped in phone booths, under park benches, and in airport lockers. As a child, I remember hearing the phrase slush fund and thinking, oh, that sounds really messy. Well, Nixon's re-election campaign was one big pile of slush. Millions in illegal contributions went for political dirty tricks as Nixon used the FBI, CIA, and IRS to persecute his enemies and secure his re-election. One of the things, of course, that we forget about Watergate is to the extent that they had this sort of guerrilla operation to sabotage the Democrats, it worked.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we don't talk about that enough. I mean, you think of a two-bit robbery, you think of these incompetent fools running around, but they actually, well, I won't say stole, but certainly influenced an election through illicit means.
Right, they did. I mean, in fact, going into that election, Ed Muskie was the leading candidate, and that was the candidate that Nixon really feared. And the Dirty Trick Squad planted this story that he had slurred, Canadian
Right.
Americans by using the word Canuck. And Muskie then,
It seems so quaint.
Yeah, it is. It's really,
it's like, oh, he said Canuck. He
yes,
can't be president.
Merciful heavens, he said it in public, no less. Yeah, and then Muskie gives this very emotional press conference and kind of clearly starts to cry a little bit, and it seems like a shaken man, and he just plummets.
Nixon got the opponent he wanted, crushing George McGovern. But Woodward and Bernstein followed the money, and the scandal finally broke wide open. In full cover-up mode, Nixon fought back with delicious, unintended irony.
I want the American people, I want you to know beyond the shadow of a doubt that during my term as president, justice will be pursued fairly, fully, and impartially, no matter who is involved.
Did he ever express at any time any regret for any of this? Did he ever say, I made a mistake, I shouldn't have done that, I shouldn't have been so interested in money, I shouldn't have been so interested in whatever?
No, Nixon, I think, believed that he was a victim of his enemies and really felt that he hadn't done much of anything wrong at all, and that he was simply the victim of circumstance, a victim of this coalescence of his enemies.
Wow, that's crazy.
But it fits his character. It's the way he operated. He really felt like it was him against the world, and he felt that even when he was on top. So he wins by this unprecedented landslide, and of course, in the months leading up to that, commits all these crimes and then begins the cover-up. So it's just, he's a one-man Greek tragedy. It's amazing.
Right. Always give your best. Never get discouraged. Never be petty. Always remember, others may hate you,
Those who hate you don't win unless you hate them. And then you destroy yourself.
Today, you can see Nixon's obsessions in two adjacent buildings in Washington, D.C. The John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts and the Watergate complex. To his dying day, Richard Nixon believed that the Kennedys had used their family fortune to steal the 1960 election away from him. But his resentment of the moneyed elite went back much further than that. When he was a teenager growing up in Whittier, California, working class, he actually got accepted to Harvard with free tuition. But he couldn't go because his family couldn't afford even the travel or the board. He went to a local school instead. So, for the rest of his life, Richard Nixon was determined to follow the money.